Hello, my name is Allison Fay. I serve as the director of the Jacob Wetterling Resource Center, a program of Zero Abuse Project. Today we're going to be doing an overview of our Empower Me curriculum lessons for parents. So Empower Me is a curriculum that we have for elementary school that schools can use, and we always want to make sure whenever we're training kids that parents are involved as well. So this is something for parents to watch before your kids have that, or at a PTA meeting, or in your faith community, or even if you're not doing that curriculum but just want some basic prevention information for you and your families. We want to start by thanking you for being invested in prevention. This is a topic when we think about abuse prevention and child maltreatment. Those are things that are hard to even imagine happening for many families, which our hope is that it doesn't, but we also want to make sure that families have tools to start conversations, so that if kids start to see some problematic behaviors or concerning behaviors, they know that their caregiver wants to know about it and they won't be in trouble, and that we can get those lines of communications starting early. And so hopefully this will give you some tools as a family to have important conversations around prevention. So I mentioned in the title slide our Empower Me curriculum. Jacob Wetterling Resource Center, for those of you who are not from the Minnesota area or haven't heard of the work that we do, we were founded following the 1989 abduction of Jacob Wetterling, who was abducted from central Minnesota. And following his abduction, his family said, we want to do what we can to get ahead of the problem of abuse, to move towards what we can do to build for kids that's positive, that's hopeful. And so we moved towards that, and we've been doing that as an agency since 1990. In 2011, we needed to do some more formalizing of the school presentations that we've been doing since 1990. We had folks in other states reaching out to us wanting to replicate what we had been doing, and so trying to get sort of what we had been working on over the years and had adapted based on evaluations from teachers and students, wanting to create a kind of kit that anybody could use in their own community to reach elementary school students. And also with legislation opportunities, Aaron's Law and other legislation that encourages, or in some states requires, public schools to teach prevention. We wanted to make sure that we were that the options that we had been using here in Minnesota could be made available to places in other states that have that legislation, or folks just trying to be proactive in prevention. So in 2011, the Empower Me sort of name began. We are very adamant here at Jacob Wetterling Resource Center to not use anything that freezes us, to move away from fear-based education. We find that people don't learn well when they're afraid, so we don't do worst case scenarios. We don't get into anything that is fear-based. We want to move towards what we can do. That idea of education we has to act. There's a lot of myths in this prevention world, and one of the things that's hard for me as a presenter to sort of figure out how to unpack is I'll often be at an elementary school doing Empower Me, and I'll have, work with 200 students or whatever it is in a day, and then I'll talk to the principal of the school, and they'll say something like, oh, well, we had 198 of the kids participate. 2 of the kids got pulled out of the sessions because their parents wanted to protect their innocence longer. And although I respect parents making decisions as to what they think makes the most sense for their kids, I wonder if those decisions are made around other kinds of safety. Like, I'm going to pull my kid out of the fire safety unit because I want to protect their innocence, or I'm going to pull my kid out about learning about seatbelts. I think when we frame body safety and internet safety just as we do any other kind of safety, it helps with our ability to have conversations on it. And then if there is a problem that's making a gut instinct go off, or someone's boundary being crossed, kids have the words and the vocabulary to talk about it just as they would with any other danger. So it's obviously a big part of prevention is how it's presented, and how it is offered to kids. And we stand behind the fact that we want to make sure that anything that we offer in prevention is done in a way that's victim-centered, that it's positive, that it's proactive, and that it encourages kids to feel confident. We know that kids, one of the phrases that we've used around here for years and years is the phrase of, we want kids to be smart and not scared. So we really want to help kids move towards the smart piece and not scared. But as we get into this, the other thing that's really important to remember is it should never be solely on a child's shoulders to protect themselves from the world we live in. That's not fair. That's not realistic. That's not helpful. If we say to an 8-year-old, we're going to teach you about body safety and now you need to go out and protect yourself, that's not going to be effective. And the more that we can get other folks and families and other ways of looking at prevention involved, kids can be one piece of the puzzle of them having this information and letting them know that they can talk to the adults in their life if they have questions or concerns, but we never want to rest prevention solely on the child. So when we look at the Prevention Institute's work, thinking about the spectrum of prevention, we strengthening one person's knowledge and skills is a part of it, but we also want to make sure that if you look at like the blue section, if they do talk to a teacher, that that teacher has some training, you know, whether it's the curriculum that we offer for teachers that's called FIRST, whether it's their own state's mandated reporting training, so that if they're talking to someone, that person isn't stuck. We want to make sure that organizational practices are such that, for example, if you're with the youth serving organization, that they're using, they don't do one-on-one isolated activities, that it's done in small groups and groups of two, groups of threes and fours and things like that, so that there's that community and not that isolation. So when we talk about the Empower Me and tools that kids should have, I'm just always very careful to make sure that parents don't leave feeling like, okay, my kid is going to learn this in school and therefore they should be able to take this on. We don't do that with any other kind of safety. We're teaching seatbelts, we teach kids to buckle up. We also educate providers about car seats. We also change our policy and legislation to make it safer for kids. So we just always want to be thinking big picture and not putting everything on the shoulders of the child. And the more family involvement, the better. I'm always so thankful when I go to PTA meetings or faith communities or community centers or other places where people gather, and there's a lot of parents there wanting to learn about online safety or personal safety or any of these kinds of things, because that means that those parents are really invested. And so if children do experience trauma of any kind and they have that caring, consistent adult in their life, it's so helpful. And if kids don't experience trauma in their life and they have those people to talk to about problem solving, they can grow up to be some of our strongest upstanders when they're seeing that there is a problem. So we always want to engage family members as a best practice on behalf of our kids. So again, thank you for being here. When we talk about prevention, there are a lot of sort of assumptions that we process with folks, and it's easier obviously to have these conversations in person because it's more interactive than listening to my voice on a webinar where you can't raise your hand in the same way. But one of the things that when we do have the in-person discussions, parents and caregivers seem surprised about is there's this perception that if a child is having a problem with an adult or another kid in their life, if they're concerned about touches, if they're concerned about abuse, that they'll talk. And we know that often children don't disclose. We want to make it easier for them to have these conversations, and Empower Me and having ongoing conversations with family can be helpful, but we need to be aware that it's not expected for children to talk about this out of nowhere. And some of the reasons that might be is that there's that fear of family rejection and fear of disbelief. If I tell, what will my family do? Will they believe me? So that's the power of the what if scenarios. We really encourage caregivers to go through what if scenarios with their kids, in which we can use as an opportunity to remind kids that if something does happen, you won't be mad at them. You're not going to reject them. You're going to believe, you're going to listen. Some of those messages, you know, what if you're playing at a friend's house and their child care provider asks you to play a game without your clothes on? How would you handle that? And letting the kid know, you know what? I would want you to tell me. I wouldn't be mad at you. And some of those messages that the kids have, one of my favorite things that I'm able to do in one of our other presentations that we do with kids and parents together is kids talk about why it's hard to talk when there's a problem, and especially with the problems about bodies. And I'll hear over and over again, well, I'm worried what that my parents will be mad at me. When the parents and the kids are there together, I can say, well, turn to the person who brought you here tonight and let that person have a minute to just reassure you that they would want to know and they wouldn't be mad at you. It's such a powerful moment to just watch all these interactions taking place of eye contact and you know, just the tone of I love you, I care about you, I want you to be safe. And so when we do what if scenarios, some of those fears that kids have come out during those what if scenarios, and we can help alleviate some of those fears for kids. One of the other things in what if is really reinforcing for kids that even if you don't get away, even if you don't say no because your body freezes up, I still won't be mad at you and I would still want to know. Our bodies, when we're dealing with things that are overwhelming, kind of go into those fight, flight, freeze moments. And a lot of times, adults and kids, when we're in a situation where someone is using power over us, we get stuck physically and we can't move and we can't say anything. And that's just our body's way of protecting us in that moment. And so we really reinforce with kids that, you know what, even if you haven't said anything, even if your body freezes, even if this has happened to you before, it is not your fault. You can still tell. Really careful. You know, anytime we're speaking to school, we're talking to kids who've already experienced maltreatment. We're talking to kids who witness maltreatment in their families. I mean, we might be also talking to kids statistically who've caused sexual harm to other people. And so, messaging around if this has happened to you and you didn't say anything, it isn't your fault. You can still tell around the kids who are being harmed is really, really important because we don't want to re victimize anybody when we're doing prevention of having them feel like, oh, well, I didn't say anything, so I am at fault. Absolutely not. We want, and we can use what ifs to help kids process that as well. And interestingly enough, young people can predict pretty well how their parents will respond. You know, this particular study had kids sort of giving an assumption of, do I think my parent will support me if I tell them that this abuse has happened? And in most cases, the kids were right. And so when we're teaching this curriculum, we teach kids about who are the 5 grown-ups you can talk to if you have a problem, because maybe it's one of the grown-ups who's on your safety net who's causing the problem, and you'd have 4 more people to tell. Maybe one of the grown-ups in the safety net doesn't know that it's not your fault, and you would have 4 more grown-ups to tell. So let's build our safety net for the 5 grown-ups we can tell, so that if the person who is causing harm doesn't know that it isn't your fault or doesn't or is the problem, you have 4 more people to tell. So we really want to help young people. They're kids are great with their intuition, are great with their gut in many ways, and so we want to make sure that we can empower them of who they can tell and who are those people. And our last piece about barriers to disclosure, reasons kids don't tell, we look at kids saying the reason I didn't tell was because the person made threats, and those can even be threats of, you know, your parent is so happy since they've been dating me, and if you tell, they won't be happy anymore. I mean, that's a real threat for an 8-year-old to unpack. For fears of what might happen if I tell, especially if the abuse is in the family. Who will take care of me? What will happen? Lack of opportunity, kids saying, I didn't ever know how to bring it up. And then lack of understanding, I didn't know it was abuse. I mean, there's studies with 3 to 18-year-olds. So if they've never been taught about bodies and touches, not even understanding that it's something that they should talk about. And then the 5th one is the closer a relationship that they have to the abuser, the harder it is to tell. So when we think about what ifs with our kids, helping them unpack some of those things. You know what? Even if somebody tells you that they don't want you to tell me, or they say something that makes you scared, know that your safety net is 5 people is stronger than one person breaking the rules. And let's try to talk about that. Most grown-ups do know the rules, and most grown-ups do want to keep you safe. With fears, you know, if we can ask our kids in some what if scenarios, what might you be scared of? When I'm doing the online safety with older kids, I hear a lot of, if I tell my parents what's happening on my phone, they'll take me on my phone. And so that idea of talking to kids before there's a problem with their phone and saying, if someone is using your phone to make you feel unsafe or scared, if you come and tell me about it, I won't take it away, but we'll work together to make it safer. And so what ifs can help impact some of those. Lack of opportunity. We shouldn't expect a 6-year-old to sit down after school and talk to us about someone who's making their gut instinct go off. That's why when we give kids the words and the vocabulary as we go through this, and as parents have and caregivers have these ongoing conversations, it hopefully provides opportunities about smaller things. Oh, I don't like it when I'm at the sporting event and this particular coach makes me feel uncomfortable, or whatever it might be, to figure, okay, what's our safety plan for that as a family? I'll make sure that I'm always at those particular practices, or should we see if we should switch to another team? I mean, some of those conversations when nothing has happened that raises a criminal red flag, but just teaching kids that they have the right to feel safe where they are, and that we can have these ongoing connecting conversations throughout their childhood. Lack of understanding. It's so important that kids learn about touches and bodies so that, just like any other kind of safety, they know that they have a right to feel safe and can talk if they have questions or problems. And we've heard over and over again from offenders that they screen to see, many of them screen to see, what does this kid know? Who does this kid going to tell? And as they try to groom and pick victims. And then the last thing is how well they know the abuser. And so we're thinking again about who makes up this safety net. When we're in the schools, it's always wonderful to point to the certain people. This is who are the people in the counseling office in the school, who's the school nurse in the school, who are your teachers, who are all the people who you can reach out to. Let's think of making our net of some people who live in our home, maybe who live in our neighborhood, maybe friends, parents, people here at school, and helping kids see the different people in their life that they can reach out to if they do have a problem with that person being the person causing the harm. And so we want to get rid of those barriers as best we can to better serve our kids. You'll notice that we don't talk about the sort of the how we know the person when we're doing our Empower Me script. If you've ever sat through one of our sessions, there's no mention of strangers or anything like that. We know that we want to focus on the behavior and not how we know the person. There's a variety of reasons for that. The first one is kids have an image in their head of what they think a stranger looks like. The younger they are, there tends to be, one of my friends who's a law enforcement officer has kids draw a stranger, and these folks have fangs and claws, and they don't look like the nice person who we may interact with in a different way. So we want to not focus on what that word, because kids automatically think that they can see visually if a person has good intentions or bad intentions. Mixed messages. If we say don't talk to people you don't know, the first day of school, everyone they meet are people that they don't know. So that's very confusing for kids. We want kids and teens to know how to ask for help. The good news is most people don't hurt kids. The good news is most people do know the safety rules around kids. So we don't want to prevent them from reaching out to the very people who can be helpful. If there ever is an emergency with a child, they're going to be meeting a lot of people they don't know in that immediate moment. And so it's not about that people we don't know are the problem. Because statistically, kids and teens are much more likely to be victimized by people that they know. When we look at My World, which happens to be specifically around missing people, we have about 105 kids in our nation every year who are kidnapped, which is 105 too many, but it's very small compared to the larger numbers of kids who are reported missing. And over 90% of alleged abusers were related or knew the victim in some way. So we don't focus on, do we know that person or not? Well, the questions that we ask is this person trying to get me to break my rules? And does this person give me an uh-oh feeling? And you can use, depending on how old the kids are, like a sports analogy of, if you were playing whatever, we'll just say hockey, but if you're playing hockey and there's an adult on the ice who doesn't know the rules, you as a kid don't have to explain the rules to them, because adults don't always listen to kids, and it can it can make things very awkward or uncomfortable. Just get off the ice and come check in with me and let me know that there's someone who doesn't know the rules. I can figure out what's going on and I can be helpful. And so if you meet someone in real life who doesn't know the rules about bodies, the rules about touches, you don't have to explain the rules to them. Just get out of that situation, come check in. Meet a kid in the neighborhood who doesn't know the rules about why we don't play with matches. I don't care if this kid is someone that's over at our house all the time or if it's someone we've just met. They are trying to get us to play with matches. I need you to come and check in with me. So it's not, do we know them or not? Are they trying to get me to break my rules? And does this person give me an uh-oh feeling? So we focus less on how do we know the person, because in most cases of abuse, it's someone the child knows. And instead, those questions of how do they make me feel? What are they asking me to do? The core messages in our prevention work, and I'll go through some of these more detail, but we teach kids about their uh-oh feeling or their gut instinct, that every kid, every grown-up, every animal has that feeling in their tummy when someone's asking to break the rules. It's usually where we feel it. And I explain it doesn't always go off until, but it's something to pay attention to. You're with a friend, your friend's saying, let's steal candy from the store, that's probably, we start to feel that in our gut, and we want to pay attention. That's our body's signal telling us we need to check in with the person who takes care of us. So talking about that gut instinct, and if someone's asking us to do something that makes us feel unsafe or is against our rules, or we're not sure about, that we can make a safety bubble away from them so we have room to move, we have room to I hear a lot from kids in the Q&A, like, what do we do about the white vans? We've been taught to avoid the white vans. It's like, there are wonderful people who drive white vans, and then if someone drives up in a white van and asks you to get into their vehicle, that's against the safety rules. We don't get into a vehicle without checking first. So we automatically, our gut is telling us they're breaking our rules because they're trying to get us in their car, and doesn't matter if we know them or not, we check first the person taking care of us, and we make that safety bubble away so that we have room to move and we have room to think, we have that head start. We also reinforce for kids that sometimes their bodies just freeze, and if that happens, it's still not our fault. We can still tell somebody. We practice saying no in a loud, firm voice, getting away and telling someone. We don't scream no, because people tend to tune out screaming. If you think of the last time you're at the store and you heard a kid scream, most people don't run to that noise. We teach them to say no from their gut in a loud, firm voice. Messages like call 911, I need a grown-up to help me, things like that. And then we get away. We make that safety bubble as and continue to keep that safety bubble as strong as we can, getting that head start, and finding anybody to tell. Most grown-ups don't hurt kids, so if someone's trying to do something that's breaking my rules, I'm going to go and try to find someone else who can help me. Best case scenario, the person who takes care of you, but if not, reach out to anybody who can help. Teaching kids it's not their fault. Someone does something that breaks their body safety rules. It's about the behavior of that person, not how you know them. We talk about touches, that idea of kids don't tell because they haven't been taught about their bodies or they don't have the opportunity. We want to give them the opportunity to have a specific conversation. Identify who their safety net adults are, who the 5 adults in their life who make up their net. If they have a problem, who they can tell. Reminding them that most people do want you to grow up to be happy, healthy, safe, and strong. So if you meet someone who doesn't know the rules about safety, to find someone who does. We teach kids about the difference between secrets and surprises. Someone asks you to keep a secret from the people who take care of you, that's usually a problem, especially if it's about a body rule or a different rule. And so surprises are when we don't tell something for a very short period of time and everyone finds out about it together and we're very happy. Surprises, secrets, or anything else, and secrets usually start to feel that gut feeling and that we're allowed to tell. We're being asked to keep a secret, especially about a safety rule. And that kids don't have to handle these things on their own. If someone is being hurt, we get a grown-up involved. That's past a kid's pay grade. These are the basic message in when we do our classroom-based or school-based presentations. As I said, some of these just drilling down a little bit more, we talk about that uh-oh feeling. And I think we as adults need to give ourselves permission, pay attention to our own uh-oh feeling. I mean, the big warning sign is pay attention to people who seem to like your kid more than you do, which is horrible, but something to pay attention to. And thinking about, isolating behaviors. Healthy adults want to be one of many adults involved in a child's life. Same thing with friends. Unhealthy friends and unhealthy adults want to separate kids from the people that love them. So no one loves you but me. No one cares about you but me. This is a secret you and I will keep together. No one else is going to know about that. That's not how a safety net works. That's isolating. So we need to pay attention to isolating behaviors. And we need to ask questions when we're enrolling our kids in things. If they're going to be doing, a dance program, check in with the dance studio. What rules do you have about coverage? Is there always more than one adult involved? What rules do you have about parents being able to swing in? Do you have a policy? Can I see it about child abuse prevention? As kids get older, are the coaches allowed to text the kids in the group? What are the rules with social media? Some of those things, asking to see policies and having those important follow-up questions. And we can provide extra resources on those as you may need them. We talk to kids again about that safety bubble. Hard to think when someone's in your space. Someone's asked you to break a rule. We want to create that space away from people. We talk about, we move away from that person. We say no in a firm voice. We move to an adult and we tell them. And our goal is to find the adult that takes care of us. But if we're, say, at school and someone's breaking our rule in the playground, maybe the playground monitor is the best person to tell. And if the first person can't tell, we keep telling, we find an adult who can help us. And even if you freeze, it's not your fault and you can still tell. We go through with kids about who makes their safety net, who are the people that they can reach out to if they need help. And then we go through 4 basic safety rules. So the first core messages is obviously divided up into smaller ways of processing it. But our 4 rules after we talk about gut instinct and the safety bubble and the 5 adults are these 4 rules. Check first. And we check first before we go places with people. If someone wants us to get in their car, we check first with whoever's taking care of us. If someone wants us to go in their house, we check first with whoever's taking care of us. So we practice checking first in different scenarios. If someone asks you to help them with a grown-up problem, we check first. If the next door neighbor says, hey, can you, my cat just had kittens, can you come over? We always check first because they're asking us to help with something and we're going into someone else's house. So we always check first. The person taking care of us knows who we are with and what we are up to. We talk about why we don't keep secrets, especially about rules and about touches. We talk about touches, and we tell a grown-up if someone is being hurt. So these are our 4 basic components to the Empower Me curriculum. I'm just going to drill down briefly on the 3rd one because that's the one that we have the most questions about, that we talk about touches. We talk to kids about is this in the wrong order? I apologize. I'm going to go forward and come back one. Hope it doesn't confuse. We want kids to know the real names of their private parts. We've had kids disclose with euphemisms and then, telling a teacher that someone has touched whatever they've been taught to call their vagina or their penis, and then that person doesn't know what they need help. So teaching kids real names of their private parts to get rid of some of that shame and help encourage their ability to come forward. If a child hurts their elbow on the playground, they should be able to go to the school nurse and say, I've hurt my elbow. If someone is doing something that touches their vagina that's making them feel confused, they should have the words to go and ask the school nurse about that as well. We want to give them those tools. Know that private parts are different from the rest of your body, empowering kids that they have the right to say no to anyone asking them to do something against their body rules or against their uh-oh feeling. And whenever we say no to another kid or grown up, we then follow up with someone who takes care of us, a teacher, a parent, a grandparent, to find out, let them know what's going on. And so we do help kids unpack the fact that there are times when someone might need to touch a kid's private parts to keep them clean and healthy. If it's a clean and healthy touch, you can ask questions about it. You don't have to keep it a secret. If someone does trick you into a touch that's confusing or scary, you can still tell. So example I'll give is I was in a 3rd grade classroom and a student raised her hand. She said, oh, well, I was playing at my friend's house and a bee stung my bottom. And was that, my friend's dad pulled the bee out. Was that a problem? And I said, well, let's talk about it. You don't have to know when you're a kid. That's why we talk about touches. So if you ever have a question about body parts and private parts and touches, please ask, because you don't have to know it all. So I'm glad you've asked. Do you think pulling the bee out sounds clean and healthy or not? And she said, well, it hurt when the bee was in there, and then when you took it out, it didn't hurt so much. So it did feel clean and healthy. And I said, well, were you allowed to talk about it? She said, yeah, I could. He called my mom and said, I've been stung by a bee, and we all talked about it together. And I said, well, that to me sounds like a clean and healthy touch, but I'm glad you asked. Because you might be getting a bath and feeling like it's clean and healthy, and someone else is giving you a bath and it doesn't feel clean and healthy. And you as a kid don't have to figure that out. You can ask. You can talk about touches, and we want to talk about touches in our families, especially if we have questions. And so we want to use that, again, as a teachable moment. We end with the fact that there are so many people out there who want to help keep kids safe. So if you're ever feeling scared or confused, or someone's asked you to break one of your rules, you're allowed to connect with one of your safety net adults. We want kids to not feel like the weight of the world's on their shoulders, but that they have people helping them who want to be supportive of them on this journey. Whenever we do prevention in our own homes, or in schools, or summer camps or whatever, we want it to be interactive, where kids aren't just being lectured, but they're having the ability to, give me a thumbs up if you think this, or put your hands on your head if you think this, that they're really engaging their full body and what they're thinking about. Empowering. We don't want to make kids feel small. We want to treat them with words and that can help them with problems. One of the phrases that I use, because depending on the audience that I'm talking to, when I even just use the idea of private parts, that can cause giggles and things with kids, which is very natural. And just saying, you know what, we don't say private part words to be silly or gross. We say private part words when we need help with our body. So I'm teaching you how to say words if you need help with your body, but we don't want to use them to be silly or gross. And if a child is engaging in that kind of potty talk, as kids are very, very traditionally known to do, just interrupting them and reminding them, do you need help with your body right now? Because we're only using those words if we need help with your body. We're not using them to be silly or gross. And making sure prevention's inclusive. We've moved away from the phrase that a lot of folks use about, private parts being the parts of your body covered by your bathing suit. Many of the cultures don't use the same, different kinds of bathing suits, some that cover up the entire body, and then that's very confusing for kids. Just telling it as it is in a way that's empowering, positive, inclusive, making sure all families are included, and knowing when we think about inclusive that there are some kids who are just naturally anxious. That's why it's wonderful for parents to have this information beforehand, so that if kids have questions and they come home from school, caregivers right there to talk to them about what they learned today, to ask them what if questions. And one of the phrases we use a lot with kids who just are anxious is, but what is our plan? You know what? We have a place to meet in case there's ever a fire. We might never have a fire. We probably won't have a fire. We have that place to meet just in case. We have a plan. You may never meet someone who doesn't know rules about body safety, but now we have a plan if we do meet someone. So it's just, and we're asking kids to repeat the plan and talk about the plan and help them feel a bit more empowered and less worried, for kids who are just naturally anxious about talking about safety. There's the kid who learns tornado safety at school in the next 6 weeks or next 6 months. They're really, really worried about severe weather. And so some of those calming discussions about, but what is our plan and what is our family plan, can help kids realize that this wouldn't be something we'd be stuck in. We would have a plan. We don't have to do it by ourselves. On our website, which is jwrc.org, we have information about how to do a family safety night. Like twice a year we get together and we talk about, where do we go in case of a fire? What about safety belts? What about bike helmets? Let's do some what ifs around bus safety. Let's do some what ifs around the computer. And just to make body safety, just like all other kinds of safety, and something that's approachable, we can talk about as a family. This is a very brief overview about just some basics for parents on prevention. You can go to our website to get more information, or to request a speaker to help with, in your community, help process some of these things. We know that caring adults are one of our biggest prevention pieces, is the adults involved and engaged in the lives of kids. So your involvement as caregivers is so important, and we are so thankful that you're here to get this information. This is my contact information. I work here in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Can be reached on our 1-800 number. That is my email, allison@zeroabuseproject.org. If I can ever be helpful in prevention, do reach out. We're proud to be part of the Zero Abuse Project. We want to build a world worthy of every kid. So thank you for being a part of this today and taking one step toward that goal.